Hello everyone. In today's video, we are going to implement GraphQL and Go using GraphQL-Go package. Then we update our integration test in Postman to verify the GraphQL query result. What is GraphQL? GraphQL is an open spec for a flexible API layer. It makes the app more responsive and efficient by loading only data you are actually using and reduce the number of round trips to fetch all of the resources for a particular view. Instead of having multiple endpoints that return fixed data structures like in REST API, GraphQL API typically only exposes a single endpoint, so a client can perform different operations. It makes this possible by utilizing strong type system and schema definition. There are three types of operations in GraphQL API: query, mutation, and subscription. We are going to discuss the first two operations and leave subscription for another time. Query is used to fetch the data. It is completely flexible. Client decides what data is actually needed by defining the actual result layout in the query. Here is the sample query that you use to search to do by title. You can specify each field to return, such as ID, user ID, title, completed, or all of them. And here is the sample result. Mutation is used to modify the data. For example, creating new data, updating existing data, and deleting existing data. Mutation follow the same syntactical structure as queries, but they always need to start with the keyword mutation. Here is the sample mutation to insert a new to-do item, and we can specify each field to return, such as ID, user ID, title, completed, or all of them. Since we don't specify the completed field, it is not returned in the result. Now let's see GraphQL in action using Postman. First, create a new to-do record. Set the method to post and URL endpoint to GraphQL. Select GraphQL in the Body tab. Enter the query as follows. The query should start with the keyword mutation. Then specify the action type, which is insert to do. Insert to do accepts three inputs. User ID is 1, title is learning Golang, and completed is false. Insert to do should return to do object with body as ID, user ID, title, or completed status. We do not need to define all field in the result if we don't need all of them. So just define the ID field as we need the newly created ID. Click Send to submit the request, and we can see the result returned with the ID as expected. Next, update the status to completed. In the query, change the action name to update to do. Add ID as an input, and completed status is true. Click Send to submit the request, and we see that the record is updated. If we submit the request again, the record is not updated as expected. Now, to get the to-do item by ID, change the query body to query, specify the action name as get to do with ID as an input, and user ID and title as body. Click Send to submit the request, and we can see the ID and title and the result as expected. Click Send to submit the request. We can see the result return in array format. Finally, let's delete the to-do record. Change the request body keyword to mutation. Change the action name to delete to do with ID as an input. The result body is deleted count. Click Send to submit the request. We see the record is deleted, and the deleted count is 1. If submit the request again, the deleted count is 0 as expected. Now, let's see how to make all this possible. First, go to Terminal and download the GraphQL-Go package. Add a new route for GraphQL in the main function, which call GraphQL to-do handlers. Then, create a new file GraphQL to-do.go. Package name handlers. Function GraphQL to-do which accepts database to-do interface and return GIN handler. Return a function with GIN context. Declare a body variable type map string interface. Use GIN bind JSON function to bind request body to the body variable. Get the query string from the request body. Call the GraphQL.do which accepts a schema and query as parameters. Then using GIN.json to return the result. Next, define the schema object. It should contain two objects, query and mutation. The root query object consists of two elements, name as query, and fields with action name as search to do and get to do. The mutation object also consists of two elements, name and fields. Name is mutation, and fields are insert to do, update to do, and delete to do. Next, let's implement the functions. The search to do function accepts to do interface and return a pointer to GraphQL field. The GraphQL field consists of name as search to dos. Description is list of to dos. Type is GraphQL new list of to do type. Argument is argument variable to be implemented. The resolve function, which accepts resolve parameters and return interface or an error. The resolve function called database search method to retrieve list of to-do items. The arguments for search to-dos are user ID of type string, title of type string, and completed of type Boolean. Similarly, the getToDo function also accepts to-do interface and return a pointer to GraphQL field. The GraphQL field consists of name as getToDo. Description is getToDo item by ID. Type is to-do type. And the resolve function which call the database get method. Argument is ID of type string. Now let's define the to-do type. The to-do type is GraphQL object with two elements, name and fields. Name is to-do type. And to-do fields are ID of type string, user ID of type integer, title of type string, and completed of type Boolean. Also define update to do type. Name as update to do type, which consists of two fields. Modified count of integer type and result of type to do. The last type is delete to do type. Name as delete to do type, which consists of only one field, deleted count of type integer. Now continue with the rest of the mutation function. Create insert to do function, which accepts database to do interface, and return GraphQL field pointer. The field name is insert to do. Description insert to do item. Type is to do type. And the resolve element is the function which calls database insert method to add to do item into the database. The arguments for insert to do are user ID of type integer and non-nullable. Title of type string and not null. And completed of type boolean and also required. Next is update to do function, which accepts database to do interface and return GraphQL field pointer. Name the field as update to do. Description is update to do by ID. The resolve function will call the database update method to update to do item by ID. Arguments of update to do are ID is the required field of type string. User ID is optional field of type integer. Title is optional field of type string. And completed is also optional field of type boolean. Finally is the delete to do function, which accepts database to do interface and return GraphQL field pointer. The field name is delete to do. Description is delete to do by ID. Type is delete to do type. The resolve function calls the database delete method to delete the record by ID. The argument is the ID field of type string and non-nullable. Now create a test in Postman to test our new GraphQL API. First, create a new collection called to do GraphQL with 2 variables. URL with value http://localhost:8080/GraphQL. ID variable as placeholder for new created ID. Next, add a new request called insert to do. Change method to post and URL using the URL variable. Change the body type to GraphQL and enter the query as follows. Mutation. Insert to do with input as. User ID is 1. Title is learning Golang and completed is false. Return the newly created ID. Go to Test tab. Define a new test case to check that the ID is created properly and save it to the variable ID placeholder that defined in the collection earlier. Copy the insert to do request. Change the name to update to do. In the body, change the action name to update to do. Give the ID variable as an input and complete it as true. And return modified count as an output result. In the Test tab, create a test case to check that the record is updated as expected. Copy the update to do request. Change the name to get to do. In the body, change the query to get to do with ID as an input. Define ID, user ID, title, and complete it as the output. In the Test tab, create a test case to check that the completed status is updated to true. Next, copy the get to do request. Change the name to search to do. In the body, change the query to search to do with title learning Golang as an input. And return ID, user ID, title, and complete it as result. In the Test tab, create a test case and check the returned result as an array of length 1. Finally, copy the get to do request. Change the name to delete to do. In the body, change the query to delete to do, which accepts ID as an input. And return deleted count as result output. Create a new test case to check the deleted count as 1. In order to run the test, we need to start the database and the application server. But first, we have to start Docker. Go to Terminal, enter open --background-docker. Wait a few minutes to Docker to start up and running. Now in the terminal, enter docker-compose up-builder to start the application. Once the application is up, go to Postman to test our new collection. Click Run on the new collection name. Verify that request is in the order of insert, update, get, search, and delete. Click on Run to perform the test. We see that the result is 5 passes and 0 failure. That concludes our GraphQL practice. Please leave comments if you have any questions. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe.